My husband asked the little tour guides, he's like, how often do you guys check these things? And the guy goes, ha 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 ha, well, you know. And that was it.
Heather Gladden and her husband Ryan have been together for more than 15 years and raised 4 children together in Sonoma County, California.
I met Ryan at a salon that I worked in. I'm a nail tech, and he came in to get a haircut. And we met, he was 23 and I was 26.
Oh, wow.
I had asked my coworker about him, and she gave him my number. And then we started talking like the Friday after Thanksgiving of '05, and we've been together ever since.
The couple bonded over being thrill seekers who found a love of vacationing at sea.
Our first cruise was for my 30th birthday, and we had a blast, and we went on quite a few others. I'd say like 3 or 4.
They would always go with friends or take their family with them on the cruises. Heather is the mother of 4 kids. But in 2016, they finally got to go just as a couple.
It was our first cruise after being together for 11 years. We figured, oh, we'll go do one by ourselves. And this one I just happened to get off of, I think, Costco Travel, because we normally do carnival cruising.
No, they did.
Yes, Costco Travel has amazing trips. You can get cruises, you can get Disneyland packages, you can get all kinds of vacation packages off of Costco Travel.
Wow. The couple drove from Northern California, where they lived, down to Long Beach, where the ship would depart. The first few days in Cabo San Lucas and Mazatlan were great, but they were really looking forward to Puerto Vallarta.
We were really excited to go to Puerto Vallarta. It was somewhere we had never gone before. And because we're avid cruisers, we don't book any excursions off the ships. We know that you can get them for like a quarter of the cost once you get off the ship. So that day, we decided that we were going to go ziplining. It's a beautiful place. It's called Nagalito Echo Park, and it's where they filmed The Predator. The scene where Arnold comes out of the water and he's like in the mud, it's filmed right there in the park.
Cute.
Yes. Well, we got off the ship, and there's all the little, I say hustlers, they're always selling you stuff around the port. And we got a guy, we're like, hey, we want to go ziplining. He's like, okay. So another couple, their name was John and Monica, and they got on the van with us.
John and Monica weren't too sure about ziplining, but Heather and Ryan were experienced zipliners, so they convinced the couple to come along.
And it was like a 45-minute tour, I think, 45 minutes to an hour to go ziplining. We didn't sign any paperwork. And we started, and there was a group, I think about 12 of us that were in our group that was going. Ryan and I were going third and fourth in the group. John and Monica happened to be going before us on all the zip lines. We had done 3. And the 4th zip line, we had to go up like a mountain that had a lot of stairs. And by the time we got up there, everybody was winded. And John and Monica were like, we're winded, go ahead, go first. And we're like, okay, great, And this is the longest one. So the guide went across, no problem. They hooked my husband up. My husband, when he was halfway through the line, they clicked me on. And the guide told us on this one, we were so high that you could see we were above the rainforest, but if you look to your left, you could see the ocean.
The trip down this zip line took Ryan about 1 to 2 minutes, and Heather took off when he was a little more than halfway down.
And because we'd ziplined before, it makes a distinct noise when it's going across. And it was chugging along. And I remember looking to my left and seeing the ocean. And I was like, wow, it's gorgeous up here. And I look ahead, and my husband's just reaching the end platform. And as soon as he stepped on that platform, it went completely dead silent on me. There wasn't a sound in sight. And I knew at that moment that something had gone wrong.
This is Live to Tell, the podcast where I talk to some of the bravest people who have been through the most horrifying things and lived to tell the tale. I'm Caitlin Van Mall.
It felt like I was falling for a good 30, 45 seconds. I probably wasn't, but that's what it felt like. Honestly, I am, one of my biggest fears in life is death. Like not for me, but for my children, like the pain of them or my husband. In that moment, I was most calm and at peace with everything. And I think it was because I knew, well, I thought there was no way I was going to survive that, how high up I was, where I was. I just thought like, well, this is, at least it's peaceful, and I mean, I really didn't think about my kids. I'm sorry. Just talking about it just makes me, it was the strangest thing that I was at the most peace I've ever been with death in my life, because I didn't think I was going to make it.
Hmm.
And next thing you know, there's like a hard like thud. And I was like, I didn't know what to do at that point. Like I opened up my eyes and I was like, I expected to be like on the ground. I wasn't sure. I was in the V of a tree branch.
Mm-hmm.
The branch is like that. And so my handlebars got crisscrossed in it. And at that point, I just started screaming. I didn't make a single sound until the moment that I was in the tree and I was stuck. And there was dogs in the middle of the jungle wherever I had landed, and they were underneath me and they were barking like crazy.
Oh.
And the next thing, I'm just screaming, help, help. And I'm just screaming as loud as I can. And one of the guys from the ziplining company comes running around down underneath me. I can see him running down a mountain, and he looks up and he sees me, and he just turns ghost white and runs the other direction. And he's yelling in Spanish, "Correle," like run, run, like hurry. At that point, my husband showed up out of nowhere, like underneath me. I don't even know where he came from. I just, all of a sudden, he was the next person I saw.
Ryan saw her fall and ran through the jungle towards her screams.
And at that point, he tried to calm me down. My leg, my left shin had a huge gash on it, and it was already swollen. My butt had gotten sliced and I was dripping blood, and he was freaking out at that point about that. And he just kept asking me if I was okay.
Gosh, how did you stay calm enough?
I wasn't. He just kept talking to me, and I was just like, please get me down. He's like, I can't do anything. We have to wait. Like, and he needed help. And I was just afraid I was going to fall the last 40 feet and get really hurt. There was nothing underneath my feet. There was nothing near me at all that I could get to besides letting my handlebars go. That was my biggest fear. And so he convinced me that I was going to be fine and that he was going to get me down. So then the guys come over with a ladder, and it's not tall enough to get me out of the tree. And so my husband's like, okay, so they're all talking, and they realized they had to loosen the tension off the other side of the zip line where I had come from, so I could wiggle my handlebars out and drop down for them to catch me.
So you had to like move the handlebars, and then you just fell?
I dropped. Yeah. They had my husband and the guys, they were out down there. They had like a, I don't know if it was a blanket or what, but they're the ones that caught me. I mean, I had to wiggle those handlebars to get out of how tight I was in that tree branch. And at that point, they tried to carry me out. I lost my shoes. They were gone because it was a really hot day. Like the sweat off of them, and they were holding my wounds on my legs. So I walked out of the jungle barefooted. I did not want anybody to carry me. The adrenaline at that point was still going so bad. They sat me down.
This was the first time Heather was able to fully assess her bruises and cable burns.
On my inner right thigh, there was probably a 2-inch one that was probably an inch wide and about 2 inches long. That was, just pink flesh, like bloody pink flesh. And then on both of the backs of my thighs was like a rope had quickly brushed over my leg and had little scabs everywhere, like rope rash. The insides of my knee, on my right knee, again, it was like probably like a 1 inch by 1 inch, and it was just completely down to like, you could see almost the fattiness in my skin.
Mm-hmm.
The harness, literally, I was completely black between my legs and around my belly where the harness had gotten me. And I guess in one of our groups, there was a guy, his sister was a doctor. So she came over and started to assess me, and she asked them to get a first aid kit. They brought over 2 first aid kits, and she goes, I refuse to use anything on you because they're all expired. She's like, nothing in here I can clean your wounds with. She's like, I don't feel safe. So at that point, we were waiting for an ambulance to come, and they just kept asking me if I wanted shots of tequila. And I was like, I don't want to drink. I want help. I hurt, Monica and John at this point, when I'm waiting for an ambulance, Monica and John come down to the spot we're at. And they were like a mother and father figure to Ryan and I that day. She kept me so calm, and John kept Ryan so calm, and they followed us to the hospitals.
Ryan went to get their belongings from their lockers. Then Heather was loaded into an ambulance and taken to a nearby clinic.
And they took me into this little room, and nobody spoke English. I was freezing cold, and now they put me in x-rays and did a bunch of x-rays of me. And then they put me in another room all by myself. And they kept telling me I needed to go in for surgery. And I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to go in for surgery. And I just kept telling them, I want my husband. I want my husband. I want my husband. And Monica came in at that point, and she's like, what's going on? And so they said something about she has internal bleeding. And I was like, no, I don't. I just want to get back to the ship.
And why did they think that you had internal bleeding?
I don't know. They never said, because it was such a language barrier. Like, that's all they just kept saying is that I had internal bleeding and that I needed to stay overnight. And I didn't know for a fact, but I felt like I never hit my stomach. I never hit, it was more my outer limbs. And honestly, I think it would have been way worse if I wasn't blacked out.
I'm sure.
Yeah, because I think me being blacked out, my body was like a rag doll. Now, mind you, the ship was leaving like at 4:00. This happened at 10:30 in the morning. And by this time, it's close to 3:00 or so, and the ship should be leaving, and I'm still at a hospital. We have no passports, because when you take a cruise, if you leave from the United States and return to the same port, you don't need a passport when going to Mexico. So I signed out AMA out of the clinic, and the ambulance took me back to the cruise ship. At this point, the cruise ship was waiting for me for an hour and a half, because there was 4 of us that were on that cruise ship that weren't accounted for. But the hospital had been in touch with the cruise line, so they knew what was going on.
But the cruise line didn't want Heather to get back on the ship against medical advice.
Because Mexico's telling them I have internal bleeding. And it's 3 days to get back to the United States. So I had to sign a medical release on the ship saying I would not use their doctors or anything on the ship. And if anything did happen to me, that they weren't at fault for it. So I got back on the ship at that point, and for the next 3 days, I literally had nightmares, like screaming nightmares. I think it was finally that evening I was able to get in the shower. I mean, the hospital didn't clean my wounds. I had still tree material in my wounds.
Yeah, I feel like I get it. Liability, sure.
Yeah.
Fine. But like, you've already said you're not going to sue them. So like, can I just have like a Band-Aid?
Yeah, no, I literally, Ryan, I got in the shower, Ryan took a washcloth, and he tried to clean my wounds as much as possible. Now, the clinic in Mexico only gave me tramadol for pain, which, it's a glorified ibuprofen, but that's all I got. I got nothing else. That's all they released me with. Yeah. And I don't drink. I'm not a big drinker, but I was taking shots of tequila to sleep, because that would, and honestly, I didn't sleep during the night. I would go sleep on the deck by the pool where there was tons of noise.
Oh, yeah.
It was the only way I could sleep. I mean, I think I was still in shock, really. I didn't expect to live. I mean, when it went silent, I thought I was gone.
Why do you think you survived?
I don't know. I still to this day, like, so at that time, my sister passed away when I was 3 months old. I had an older sister. She drowned in my grandma's swimming pool. I never got to meet her. My mom always said she was my guardian angel. I don't know how much, what a blah, 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 whatever. I'm not really a true believer, but in that day, I thanked her up and down. Like I mean, I don't know. Is there a purpose I'm still here for? I don't know. I think about that all the time.
Heather had to make it through the 3 days it took to travel back to the United States. But she wasn't the only one on the ship with a medical emergency.
Our ship was really rough, and we were going really fast, and everybody could tell that there was like, I wasn't in dire emergency. I mean, I'd made it through the night. Obviously, I wasn't having this massive internal bleeding like they were saying that I did. So security kept checking on us. And my husband said, like, dude, we're going really fast. It's like really rough. He goes, oh yeah, a guy had a heart attack. We're trying to get back to to United States waters so we can get him airlifted off the flight. We're like, oh, okay. Well, later on that night, we found out it was John, and he had a heart attack from like the stress of because he watched me fall out of the sky, and he survived. But it was just like, holy Jesus, this whole trip turned into a nightmare. John and Monica were ahead of us on every line except for that line. And God, thank God it was me and not them being older than us. Would they have made it? Would they, all of that.
Ryan took the incident really hard. Seeing your wife fall from the sky, then screaming for her life and covered in blood, isn't easy.
It affected him extremely, like, emotionally hard. Like, he said that in those moments because he saw the cable go right by his feet when it came undone from the cement. And when he turned around and I was gone, he said, where's my wife? And the guy looked at my husband and goes, I don't know. And then he said that he could hear me screaming. And he says he ran straight down. There was no trail. He said he just went and followed me screaming to find me. But once we got back to the ship and he was trying to digest everything, he had to go and vent he called our friend that was watching our kids. So he had to tell somebody that night. For me, it took a minute. I don't think I was ready to talk about it.
After an agonizing 3 days on the ship, they finally reached port at Long Beach, California.
And my husband's like, do you want to go to the hospital? And I was like, I didn't want to go to the hospital in LA. That's 8 hours away if I needed medical records or anything. So we drove 7.5 hours all the way back to Sonoma County.
What was that drive like?
Miserable.
How do you sit?
I couldn't. We have leather seats and it was hot and my wounds are pussing and oozing. And it was literally one of the most miserable trips that I had going back home. I mean, we had to stop, I think 2 or 3 times just so I could get out and like try to put something down again, try to just get comfortable because I was not comfortable at all.
Yeah.
And that was when I was wishing, man, I wish I would have flown, but they probably wouldn't have even let me at that point.
Yeah.
And in Santa Rosa, we hit the first hospital and I literally walked in wearing my booty shorts because I couldn't wear clothing because my wounds were oozing and sticky and it's just horrid. And they did a full over of me and I ended up tearing my MCL had a tear and I sprained my ACL on my right knee. And then my shin, I didn't need stitches on it. It just ended up being like a nasty cut I had a softball size lump on it from hitting a tree. And my butt, it wasn't as deep as they thought it was. And I didn't need stitches on that either. So, I mean, it would have been too late because Mexico didn't do anything with them, but at least I walked away with minimal injuries physically. It was close to July, August before I was back and functioning fully. I mean, I didn't drive for like 3 or 4 months because it was my right leg that was in an immobilizer. So I was really dependent on other people for like the first 3 or 4 months.
After finally getting appropriate medical attention, Heather was also reunited with her kids.
I can't even explain. I mean, it was the most joyous thing. I mean, they were 3 and 5, and to think that they almost didn't have me for their whole entire life was just made me absolutely insane. My older 2 would have had me for some good years, but the little ones were so little. I mean, my 3-year-old wouldn't understand. It was definitely one of the best things seeing them.
Yeah,
made me feel so. I mean, I was hurt. I was on crutches. I was in an immobilizer for 4 months for my leg. I couldn't do anything. They knew I couldn't sleep. Everything was, just hard for me to do anything once I got home.
Yeah. And taking care of 4 kids. I mean, I know the 2 older ones were pretty self-sufficient, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a cooker. I love to cook. I love to, not to be able to do anything for my family killed me at that point, but it was most important that I healed, as much as I could. Now, mentally is a total different story.
Physically, she was going to be fine. But falling from that distance and believing she was going to die had a heavy impact on Heather.
It still affects me. Number one thing, and my husband will say he hates it to death, I cannot do silence. Have to sleep with the TV on. If the power goes out and the TV goes off, it wakes me up out of a dead sleep. We're adrenaline junkies. We have quads. We've done, zip line before, water ski, all of that stuff. But now I don't even like my kids to go on fair rides. I look at every bolt, every cable, everything like it's going to snap and what's going to happen. And it's like just being around it, or even heights, just bring back like, oh my God, like I start to panic. I panic. And it's just anything that I cannot control anymore myself, I really freak out. Even going to Vegas, they have a thing called the high roller, and it goes 550 feet up in the air, and you're like in a bubble, and it's like a observatory bubble. And I went in that, and I literally cried the whole entire time I was up there, because it was like the distance that I fell. And when you're seeing it like that, it was just very like, I have no control. And I know at any moment things can change.
Did you seek any help for it?
I did. I had to do therapy because the PTSD was just, I cried. I couldn't sleep. Like I said, our youngest was 3, and I would be sleeping and I'd wake up and try to get to her room thinking she was screaming. And it's myself waking me up because I'm screaming, because I'm going through it all over again on repeat. And it took a long time before I stopped having the nightmares of it, because it definitely mentally messed me up. Now, the TV, like if we're watching a show and somebody's ziplining, the sound instantly brings me back almost to that day. Like, it just triggers that like whole emotional thing on me every time hearing that noise.
Yeah. What kind of therapy did you do?
Just went to the psychologist, and we just sat and talked, and she just, I have an iffy relationship with therapists, but she just tried to work through me that, that it's not a once in a lifetime thing. That's the wrong word. It's, accidents happen all the time. It just, unfortunately, luck of the draw, it happened to be me. I just kind of have the luck of having things that are really random happen to me, unfortunately.
How about Ryan? Did he seek any help?
No, he didn't. For him, I think his help was just seeing me heal and seeing me like actually be there every day of his life, and that he still has me. That I think was like enough for him. He kind of compartmentalize. How do I say that? I can't even say that.
Compartmentalize.
There you go. That's more of his style.
Okay.
He'll just keep it all in and keep it to himself. And I'm sure he has days he probably thinks about it, but he doesn't express it very much anymore.
Yeah.
Not like at the beginning. He was like absolutely distraught.
The Gladdens didn't sign any type of release before going on the zipline and sought legal action against the zipline company. The company said the cable didn't snap, but rather the security bolt holding the tension on the cable came loose from the ground.
My husband watched that whole line slide right by his foot and off the side of the mountain. So them saying that it didn't snap is absolutely ridiculous, because he watched it with his eyes. And everybody said it was the loudest pop that they had heard. It echoed through the canyons. And that was the pressure of that bolt coming out of that cement as it popped. When we got back, and a friend of mine on Facebook, she was like, hey, you need to seek legal advice, yada, yada, yada. So we contacted a really good accident attorney in Santa Rosa, and we went down and met with him. And on our consultation, he was like, oh, they advertise on a U.S., on a cruise ship. There's advertisements of them all over the U.S. I'm pretty sure we can do this. You're going to be sitting pretty. I was like, okay, whatever, And months went by, and then found out that I had to go to Mexico to file, because they do not practice in the United States. And there was just no way I was going. I honestly, unfortunately, you see so many horror stories or on TV about, people like not coming back if you're going to, do something as risky as that. So we chose not to do anything. And the the time to file expired and I just let it go.
How did that feel?
I still feel crappy because something I didn't say earlier was that when my husband went to get our stuff from our lockers, the workers there were asking, like new people were coming in, the buses were still shipping people in because they were still putting people on zip lines. When my husband was grabbing stuff out of the locker, he heard somebody go, "What happened? Why is the ambulance here?" And one of the workers said, "Oh, a lady jumped off the cliff." And I didn't jump off a cliff. I was clicked in. Everybody witnessed to that. And they still have taken no accountability and done nothing about it.
Though Heather has given up on leaping from great heights, she doesn't want to hold her children back from their own experiences.
My daughter used to do competitive cheer, and we were in Vegas, and she wanted to zip line down on the boulevard. And I couldn't even watch her. My friend took her because I was just so horrified. But I realized that I can't hold them back from being themselves because I'd be a horrible parent. They've got to live too. I sat in my hotel room and it was, I know it sounds funny, but we were staying at the Flamingo, and the Link Promenade connects right next to the Flamingo, and that's where the zip lines. And our room we could watch the zip liners go by. So I watched it from in there.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it was easier that way.
Have you been on cruise, like just the two of you, more cruises since then?
Not just us. We've gone to resorts, but we haven't gone on a cruise just us again. Yeah, we've gone either with friends or our kids.
Yeah.
And we've been back to Puerto Vallarta. Did not go back to the facility or anything. I want to say we went back like almost a year after we were in Puerto Vallarta. And the taxi driver was telling us the story about some girl that had fallen from the zip line, and we were kind of laughing because I was like, "Oh, that's me."
I think that's it. What do you watch when you're falling asleep?
ID channel.
Yeah, I knew it. I was like, this lady falls asleep to murder.
Yep. That's my soothing, my calming is murder shows or murder documentary on Netflix. I mean, I've seen them all.
This is Live to Tell. I'm Caitlin Van Mall. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at Live to Tell Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps the show. I'll see you in 2 weeks.